Hi everyone, so I'm Laura from the Stroke Association and I'm with my colleague Eamon at the moment, and as Jeff says, we're from the Stroke Association and we've been asked to do this presentation today to give you a bit of an idea about stroke and exercise about stroke in general. If you don't know about us as a charity, we're the UK's leading stroke charity and we're dedicated to rebuilding lives after stroke. So we offer stroke services, we campaign for stroke care, we fund research and we fundraise in order to expand our reach to as many stroke survivors as possible. So Eamon and I are both based in the Northwest and our roles covers just the Northwest. We're kind of here because we're both doing projects which we'll talk about a little bit, which involve exercise after stroke and getting people who've had a stroke active. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to do the first part of the presentation and then Eamon is going to come and take over and do his part of the presentation, and then Andrew will do his bit at the end, and then as Jeff said, we've got questions as well. So hopefully everyone can hear, but if you do have any problems with the sound, let me know. So just to outline some of the aims of the webinar today, by the end of the session, we hope that you will have an idea about what stroke is and some of the effects of stroke. You have an idea about the work of our charity and the support that we provide to stroke survivors. You are aware of some of the work that we do in helping stroke survivors to become more active and the benefits of physical activity after stroke, and that as individuals and leisure providers, you understand how you can become more stroke friendly and make your activities and centres more accessible to those affected by stroke. So hopefully that sounds good and why you've come along today. So some information about stroke. In the UK, there are 1.2 million stroke survivors living in the UK, and that's 2% of the entire population. I think sometimes we are guilty of thinking that stroke is just something that happens to old people, but stroke can happen to anyone at any time, and it's regardless of their age, gender, race or social status. So it can happen to fathers, it can happen to children, it can happen to grandparents too. Everyone of all ages live with stroke. So while strokes are more common in older people, people are actually having strokes earlier in their lives, and around 1 in 4 strokes happen to people of working age. There are also over 400 childhood strokes each year in the UK. So there are more than 100,000 strokes each year. That's around 1 every 5 minutes, so a huge number. Stroke has a sudden and massive impact on people's lives. It can be really devastating. The effects of stroke is really far-ranging and it can rob you of your speech, your ability to walk, but it can also affect things like vision, memory, concentration and emotions. And we'll talk more about the effects of stroke shortly. Stroke causes a greater range of disabilities than any other condition, and almost 2/3 of stroke survivors leave hospital with a disability. So that is one of the reasons we're here today, to talk about stroke, because the work that you're doing, it is likely that you will be having stroke survivors accessing your services. So thanks to improvements in stroke care, you're actually more likely to survive a stroke compared to 20 years ago, but it's still the fourth biggest killer in England and Wales, and the 3rd in Scotland and Northern Ireland. And each year, stroke kills more men than prostate cancer and twice as many women as breast cancer. As a charity, we are here to help. Despite the huge scale of the problem, stroke does remain underfunded and misunderstood. On top of this, the number of stroke survivors living in the UK is expected to more than double in the next 20 years. So that's why what we do is really important. We are the only charity working across the UK leading the fight to conquer stroke through our support services, research and our campaigning. We want to change the way people think about stroke and educate them about stroke, and also raise awareness about stroke and also about prevention, because it'd be great if we could see those numbers reducing. So that's why we're doing the webinar today, to help you learn a bit more about stroke, the Stroke Association, and what you can do to help us conquer stroke and rebuild people's lives. Okay, so thinking about what a stroke is, I'm sure some people are aware, so sorry if that's the case, but a stroke is a brain attack, and it happens when the blood supply to part of your brain is cut off. And without that blood going to the brain cells can be damaged or die. There are two main types of stroke. Most strokes, and that's around 85%, are known as ischemic strokes, and that is a type of stroke caused by a blockage, such as a clot, which cuts off blood supply to the brain and stops it travelling further round. But strokes can also be known as hemorrhagic strokes, and they can happen because of a bleed caused by a burst blood vessel within the surface of the brain. So I like to think of it as an ischemic stroke. The blood cells are getting starved of that oxygen from the blood supply, or hemorrhagic strokes, they're kind of being drowned in excess blood, which can cause the effect. Whilst hemorrhagic strokes are not as common, they can be more serious and are often associated with a higher risk of dying within the first 3 months. We're going to talk a little bit now about TIAs, or mini strokes. Some people can experience these. People often think that they might just be having a funny turn, but a TIA, or a mini stroke, is the same as a stroke, except symptoms only last for a short amount of time. So a TIA is when the effect lasts for no more than 24 hours. After that 24-hour period, someone should have returned to their normal functioning and have no signs of the symptoms you were experiencing before. So a TIA happens when a blood vessel in the brain gets blocked temporarily, but then the blockage clears by itself. So TIAs are very serious, and they're a major warning sign that there's a problem and that you're at risk of a stroke. More than 1 in 12 people who have a TIA will go on to have a stroke within a week of having the TIA. And about half of all strokes after a TIA occur within the first 24 hours. So don't ignore it and get it treated urgently. Thinking about some of the signs of stroke. Stroke is a medical emergency, and it always requires urgent medical attention, so always dial 999. Recognising signs, it's crucial, because the quicker a person arrives at a specialist stroke unit, the quicker they're going to receive that stroke treatment. To help more people recognise the signs and symptoms of stroke, the Stroke Association helps to fund the development and spread awareness of the FAST test. I'm just getting some background noise, so I don't know if people might not be muted, but if you could try and mute, that would be great. Thank you. So, I'm not sure if people have seen FAST test adverts on the telly. They were something funded by NHS Public Health England, but we did play a part in it as well. And they demonstrate the FAST test. So this is a simple way of helping to identify the 3 most common signs of stroke. Face. Look at the person's face and ask them to smile. Has their face fallen on one side? Arm weakness. Ask the person to raise both of their arms and keep them there. Are they unable to raise one of their arms? Speech problems. Ask the person to tell you their name or say hello. Is their speech slurred? And if you're recognising any of those signs, it's time to call 999 and get them to get looked at and get that treatment that they might need. We encourage everyone to learn this and share it with people, so if there's just one action you can do after this webinar, it's go and tell people about the FAST test. It really can save lives. So whilst the FAST test tells you the main signs of a stroke, there are some others to look out for. So some of these are sudden weakness or numbness on one side. That could include the legs, hands or feet. It might be that someone has difficulty finding words or speaking in clear sentences. People could have sudden blurred vision or loss of sight in one or both of their eyes. Sudden memory loss or confusion and dizziness or a sudden fall. It could be something like a sudden severe headache. Again, if you spot any of those signs, don't wait and call 999. There are many effects of stroke, so we're going to talk about some of these now. And then Eamon is going to go into some in a bit more detail later on. So the brain controls everything that we do, everything that we think and feel, your personality, your sense of humour, your behaviours and your opinions. So the effects of a stroke depend on two things. One, where the stroke is in your brain, and two, how much the stroke has damaged your brain, so how many of those cells have been affected. Thinking about some of the effects, people might suffer with problems with the memory and thinking. After a stroke, most people will have some difficulties. About 60% of stroke survivors have visual problems immediately after the stroke. And 1/3 of stroke survivors experience problems with communication. Around half of stroke survivors have problems swallowing, and 80% of stroke survivors experience problems with movement. Incontinence can be a problem, and numbness is also an issue where around half of stroke survivors have impaired sensation, which can create a range of problems. There are lots of other hidden effects of stroke which people don't realise, and that can be really frustrating for stroke survivors because sometimes whilst they might appear okay, they might not be feeling okay. Fatigue is a massive factor. Emotionalism affects around 1 in 5 stroke survivors, and approximately 50% of stroke survivors suffer depression in the first year following their stroke. Over half of stroke survivors experience symptoms of anxiety at some point in the 10 years after their stroke, and behaviour can really change. So thinking of these effects, they're so wide-ranging, that is why we try to get out there and speak about them, to give people a better awareness, because when we're dealing with people through our day-to-day lives and our work, it's really good to have an awareness of not just the physical effects of stroke, but the other things that are going on as well. We mentioned before that 1/3 of stroke survivors struggle with communication problems after the stroke. We call this aphasia, and in the UK there are more than 350,000 people living with this. When we communicate, our brain has to complete different tasks, and different parts of our brain is responsible for different things. So if one part of the brain is affected by the stroke, it can cause problems with communication. With the help of speech and language therapists and different tools and support, stroke survivors can often learn to communicate again, but it's really important to remember that having aphasia doesn't affect someone's intelligence, and it can be really frustrating and often overlooked when we're trying to communicate with people if we're talking to them like the children they're not. So how can we help someone with aphasia to communicate? Stroke survivors say that this can be one of the biggest challenges because people don't understand and don't know. Even with the people that they love the most and are closest to, it can be frustrating because people can still dismiss them. So some of the key tips that we have for when you might be dealing with people who have aphasia is face them when you talk. So look at them so they can see your facial expressions and you can see theirs as well. Ask them what helps them to understand you better. So would drawing or writing down or using gestures, thumbs up, thumb down, would that help them? Try and speak as clearly as you can and keep your sentences short, and wait for them to reply without interrupting. So the biggest thing that stroke survivors can often say is helpful is just giving them that time to try and get their message across. If anyone wants more information about aphasia, we have lots on our website. And we can always send stuff via email as well, so just let us know at the end. After a stroke, visual problems can be common, so about 60% of stroke survivors have visual problems, and this can make daily activities really difficult. Stroke can affect your vision in different ways, so someone might suffer with double vision. It could be sensitivity to light, or it could be that they've lost part of the visual field. So we can understand how when we're out and about, this can be heightened. As we mentioned before, 80% of stroke survivors experience problems with movement following their stroke. Many stroke survivors have weakness or stiffness in their muscles, or they might lose control of them altogether. It's common for a whole side of a stroke survivor's body to be weak after a stroke, but they might have weakness in just one arm or one leg. It really does affect people differently. Muscle weakness affects how well stroke survivors can move the body, and it can also make balance and moving around difficult too. So even with all the effects of stroke, with the right support, many stroke survivors can and do make a good recovery. We're committed to helping stroke survivors rebuild their lives after stroke and working with different people in order to enable this to happen. Some of the things that we do are offer stroke support services. We have a network of clubs and groups for stroke survivors and carers to go along to. We offer life after stroke grants because we know that stroke can be life-changing, and there's also factors with finances and not being able to work that can make things really tough at a really bad time. And we also offer information and advice through our telephone helpline and our online platform, My Stroke Guide. So you've heard about what we do in terms of the services that we can offer, but we also campaign because it's essential that stroke survivors get the care and treatment that they deserve no matter where they live. We don't want anyone to be suffering from the postcode lottery where there's inequalities with care and treatment. So we do actively campaign for better stroke care, and we work with politicians of all parties to ensure that stroke remains high on the political agenda. By listening to and working with people affected by stroke, we can drive improvements in stroke care. With the right support, you can adapt to a new life after stroke. That's why we fund research across the pathway, so in prevention, treatment and rehabilitation, to make sure every aspect is covered. So now we're kind of getting on to talking about exercise and what we're doing as a charity to tackle inactivity. So I mentioned before, but Eamon and I are both working on projects within the organisation to get people moving. So Eamon is working part of the Moving Forwards After Stroke Exercise Rehabilitation Programme, and he'll talk to you a bit more about that shortly. We also have a successful partnership with Wellbeing England, who are helping stroke survivors get into golf, whether they played golf before or not. And this has been a really successful partnership and led to us setting up golf groups in areas right across, well, the northwest, but also the country as a whole. And we've got actually having a golf tournament next week in order to bring people together to see the benefit of the golf and get some peer support at the same time. I'm currently delivering a project called Active Lives After Stroke in central Lancashire. So this is a 2-year For England funded project looking at how we can get stroke survivors to become active and stay active, incorporating physical activity into peer support groups. We know that being active is important, but it really can be daunting for people after their stroke. So it's designed to help stroke survivors get active at their own pace and meet other people as well. We've got over 250 voluntary-led groups across the UK, so these are peer support groups run by volunteers offering support to people affected by stroke. And many of these groups are providing the members with opportunities to move around more, and it really is amazing to see this develop organically, people just going out and seeing opportunities for themselves, for their members, without staff members necessarily even having to be involved. So as part of my role, I support groups around the northwest, and in the northwest alone we've got groups which offer fishing, walking football, golf, bocce, disability darts, bowls, chair-based exercise and allotments. So there's so much going on within these voluntary-led groups. And within the charity as well, we really are pushing for more people and more of a focus around physical activity. So we have held some sports days for people within our clubs and groups to get involved with, and like I mentioned, we've got the tournament that are bringing people together to play golf. So why are we doing this? We want to tackle inactivity and disability. There are many barriers for stroke survivors to partake in physical activity, and I'm sure you can understand that based upon the effects of stroke that we were talking about before. And we know that there's a huge link between inactivity and disability. So 1 in 5 people in England have a long-standing disability or illness. We know that stroke is the leading cause of adult disability, and through Sport England research, we also know that disabled people are nearly twice as likely to be inactive compared to non-disabled people. We all know that there are numerous benefits of physical activity after stroke, and this is why encouraging activity is high on our agenda. Billinger et al., you can see from this quote here, found that physical activity and exercise following stroke can improve an individual's cardiovascular fitness, the walking ability and arm strength. But they also found that physical activity can help mood, cognitive function, memory and quality of life after stroke. So many of the different factors that we were talking about earlier. Okay, that's enough of you hearing my voice for a bit. Eamon is going to take over this bit now, so if you just give us 1 second.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Laura has introduced me, Eamon Green, my role within the Stroke Association is Exercise Support Coordinator. So I'm going to talk about the effects of stroke on somebody who's considering doing some exercise and how that might impact on whether to do any or not, how that affects their mood, and their thoughts and so on. I'll talk a little bit in some detail about the programme that I run called Moving Forward After Stroke. And we don't know much about swimming, but there is some information that we can share in a little bit of research that we've done on that. So Laura's explained in some detail what can happen in terms of mobility for a stroke survivor. The slide that you can see now is just headlining some of those, and what I'll do, I'll pick each of those in turn and go through them. But as you can see, the highlighted ones are weakness, coordination problems, changes in the muscles, balance problems, and fatigue. As Laura's already mentioned as well, the body can be affected in different ways. People's foot and legs may be paralysed completely, or they may be weak. The technical terms for this, if they're paralysed on one side, it's called hemiplegia, and if there's a weakness on one side, it's hemiparesis. Coordination problems. A stroke survivor will have difficulty coordinating movements. They'll feel very slow and clumsy, so much so that they have to concentrate even doing the simplest movements, like for example getting out of bed, walking to the bathroom. That can become quite a difficult challenge. Muscle changes. People are left feeling weak. Again, there's some technical terms here that you probably may not need to know, but if you do come across them, if someone's referred by a physiotherapist as having high tone, that's their muscles being stiff and tight, also known as spasticity. That can be very hard to treat, particularly around the shoulder region. And low tone is when the muscles feel floppy or loose, and the technical term for that is hypnotonia. Balance problems. I have just this morning done a assessment of 8 people who are joining our next Moving Forward After Stroke programme in Rochdale at Link for Life there. And of the 8 people, I think 5, when we asked them the question when we did the PARQ with them, was that they all, 5 of them at least, had balance problems caused by the stroke. So even simply, walking down the street, they can feel unsteady, feel a sensation that they're about to fall over. And 2 of the people this morning actually had walking frames with them for that very reason, that there's a fear that they might tumble at any time, and the walking frame acts as a sort of a safety net for them. So balance problems are very, very common. And the last one that we're looking at now is fatigue. People are extremely tired after the stroke. Sometimes they have to sleep during the day. They sleep numerous hours at night, but sometimes need, as I say, 2, 3, certainly 1 sleep in the day, sometimes more than that. Also, doing exercise can make people feel extremely tired and wipe them out. The exercise session we do in our programme, it's probably about 45 minutes of a light circuit, but people have said afterwards that they have to go home and they feel flaked out with it. Also made worse by having to exercise, but also the concentration that takes, for example, to make sure that they're not going to fall and they feel safe doing the exercises. So exercise after stroke. I'm going to look at some of the barriers now, and first of all, some of the guidelines that or the advice that we give to people when they're considering doing some exercise. First of all, it's the fear factor. It's almost the unknown. Yes, they may have exercised prior to having a stroke. They may have been very active. They may have exercised every day, but now, once the stroke has occurred, there's that fear factor and a reluctance to get involved in something that they think possibly could bring another stroke on, or they don't have the confidence to do any more exercise and feel a bit not embarrassed, but I feel a bit self-conscious about trying to do some exercise with a possible disability. The advice, as applies to everybody, is moderate activity, 150 minutes a week. Moderate activity week class, you probably know anyway, anything that gets you slightly out of breath, gets your heart racing a little bit, and the advice there, as I say, is 150 minutes a week. The advice we give to people is do something that you enjoy. There's no point in, if you're going to do some exercise, doing something that you're going to find a bit of a task and a challenge. Do something that is enjoyable. Exercising with others. Again, I'll talk about our moving forward program shortly, but one of the main benefits of it is the fact that you can, or people can exercise with other people who've suffered a stroke and have been through a similar sort of set of circumstances. So it's always a good advice to join a group and exercise with others. Set a goal. If I can refer again to the assessments we did this morning in Rochdale, I asked everybody that came along what their goal was. This is a 12-week program. What's your goal at the end of the 12 weeks? And there was a varied variety, a selection of answers. One was, I just want to be happy. Another one was, I want to have a bit more strength. Another one, I want to have more confidence. So it's good to set a goal when you're exercising or talking to somebody who's had a stroke, to ask them what their end goal is. Laura just mentioned the study that's already taken place, and there's a headline again: physical activity can help prevent a recurrent stroke. In addition to physical benefits, aerobic exercise has been found to promote cognitive recovery in stroke survivors. Okay, so when somebody has a stroke and they are in hospital recovering, they will get 6 weeks of physiotherapy from the National Health Service. The physio will start to work with people in the hospital, and that will often continue, and normally will continue when people get back home. So the neurophysio will work with the individual, set goals for them, and help develop a recovery program. I've already mentioned, and Laura did too, that the impact of a stroke is never really the same for the two people. So everybody's got different challenges, and some people have to start from scratch. They may, for example, have to relearn now how to roll over in bed, move from a sitting to a standing position, move from a bed to a chair or toilet, and even to walk. So the neurophysio plays a very important part in a patient's recovery. The benefit of exercising is already been mentioned this afternoon: improved strength, coordination, improved balance, sensation, and improved fitness. Repetition is the key to improvement. The program I help deliver is a circuit-based class in a studio where people come each week for 12 weeks with the intention of increasing the intensity of the exercises each week. So getting into a mindset of doing the exercises and getting used to them and repeating them is the key to people improving and gaining in confidence. And moving and exercise can help to reduce muscle stiffness and pain. The studies that have taken place, these are largely American studies, but there are 3 goals that highlighted were to regain pre-stroke levels of activity, preventing recurrent stroke and cardiovascular events, and improving cardiovascular fitness. I should have said those were the main goals that people asked of stroke survivors, what they wanted to happen to them in terms of exercise once they got back on the road to recovery. Those are the 3 main goals that people highlighted. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about why somebody who has had a stroke doesn't want to exercise particularly. Many reasons. First of all, the impairment from the stroke affecting their mobility and being able to move around. Cardiovascular disease. They may have recurring or undercurring health conditions. Diabetes is another one that this morning at the Rochdale group a number of them had. Cognitive impairments after the stroke. Depression. Pain from possibly the spasticity they've had, the fear of social isolation, lack of confidence, and no sense of control. Moving on from that, lack of motivation, no energy, fear of being injured, hurting themselves, fear of having another stroke. They're unsure of the benefits and indeed what their own expectations are, and we find that people often have to have encouragement from close family and friends to even consider doing some exercise. Lack of self-belief, the perception of stroke impairments and what they may be able to achieve and not do. Exercise history, they may hate exercise, they may have hated exercise all their life and they're reluctant to get involved with it. Fear of losing balance, fear of falling, as I've already mentioned. Balance is a huge issue, and people are often scared to even try exercise after that. And not having the ability to complete any of the exercises. So again, we've highlighted this already this afternoon. Why should somebody exercise who's had a stroke? Because, as we will tell them, it'll improve mobility, improve balance. From the research we've done and the evaluation we've had done on our programme, the Moving Forward programme, what we found, responses to questions, and what helps you most, are these community-led exercise programmes and having someone who is giving them clear instructions, ensuring safety and comfort and motivation at all times. So those are some of the barriers, some of the expectations. Why would somebody exercise? This programme that I deliver, Moving Forward After Stroke, it's a 12-week programme, 2 hours a week for 12 weeks. We're piloting the programme in Rochdale, Oldham and Stockport in Greater Manchester. We have run it also in Salford. We've done an evaluation and we're hoping, if we can find the funding, which wasn't ever thus, that we can hopefully continue this in future years. At the moment we've got funding until the end of March to deliver this programme, but fingers crossed we'll be able to go beyond that. So we ask people to commit to 2 hours a week for 12 consecutive weeks. Why should they do it? Because it can improve their physical fitness, improving their strength, flexibility, endurance, and support positive lifestyle changes. It's a partnership between ourselves, Later Life Training, who are the training providers who do the Level 4 exercise following stroke qualification for exercise instructors and personal trainers, local authorities and local leisure centres. We can only deliver this programme in areas where we've got Later Life Level 4 qualified exercise instructor. They're accredited and we're not allowed to deliver it in other areas, which is one of the reasons why the existing areas of Rochdale, Stockport and Oldham are the ones that are on board with the programme, because they had somebody in place who could deliver. So yes, there are eligibility criteria. There they are on the slide. Be able to sit in any seat independently, able to mobilise more than 5 metres with or without a walking aid. Laura mentioned people with communication issues. We ask that they have a communication strategy, and that may even mean bringing along a family member or carer who can join in with them and can take part in the first hour of the sessions, which is all about education and lifestyle. Other eligibility criteria: resting heart rate of 100 beats per minute is the max, and blood pressure maximum of 180 over 100. So we do the assessments before we start the programme, and the assessment is carried out by a neurophysiotherapist. So this morning, if I can use Rochdale as an example, we had 8 people to be assessed. They spend about 10-15 minutes with me while we go through the paperwork, which is the usual, a consent form, PARQ, and we ask that they bring along with them a referral letter from GP or a signed referral form that we will provide them in advance of coming along to the assessment. So they're assessed by the neurophysio, who does 2 relatively straightforward tests: timed up and go from a chair, and a 5-meter walk, take blood pressure and resting heart rate, and that's all that we do. However, the physio will also, when they're doing these tests, keep an eye out for their balance, their gait. We'll ask questions about their issues, and he or she will do an individual report on each person that's assessed, and that advice will be given to the exercise instructor when they run the sessions in the subsequent weeks. So each person's weaknesses are noted, and they're not asked to do anything that is likely to cause them issues. So the actual sessions, there's 2 hours a week, as I say. The first hour is with me, where we look at a different subject each week about lifestyle. So it could be nutrition, it could be exercise at home, it could be well-being. There's also one on meal planning. As I say, it's a different one each week, where we just sit in a group and talk about how people might address any issues they have over those topics. After a brief break, 10 minutes, they're upstairs in the exercise studio, and the class that's delivered is called a starter program, so it is quite low level. The exercise session consists of a warm-up and then the circuits, and the circuit includes sit to stand, a wall press, ball raise and lower, a stationary bike, 10-meter walk, and a balance exercise. There's also some exercises with resistance bands, do the warm down and a stretch, and that's what they do each week for the length of the program. The intensity is increased as we go along, so it gets more challenging and more difficult, if you like, for the individuals. So after the 12 weeks, we don't leave them high and dry. We do a final assessment, and the aim of the program was to make sure that people have enjoyed it, and it's given them the encouragement and the boost to do more exercise regularly. So they'll sit down with themselves to fill out a final assessment form, but they'll also meet with the exercise instructor, who will highlight opportunities that are available locally that someone might want to join in. So, for example, it could be a local walking group, it could be reduced rate membership at the leisure centre that we use, or it could even be to join the swimming class. It all depends on the individual and what they require. So I mentioned where the pilots were running in Greater Manchester. We've just had an evaluation carried out by a third party, not just on Greater Manchester, but on the programme nationally. There's about 5 areas in the country that are trialling it, and that's been very positive. That report's now gone to our management board and our trustees, and now we're just waiting to see if there's potential to carry on with the funding for the programme. We've paid for the funding ourselves from our legacy money that people have left us, so we're now trying to persuade commissioners in local authority areas to support this programme. Okay, so we do ask people what they did previously to having had a stroke and what they'd like to do again. We know that some of the benefits of swimming, those stroke survivors who used to go swimming know the benefits, and one of my volunteers in Rochdale is a qualified swimming coach. So he works with stroke survivors on quite a regular basis. But you'll know yourselves the benefits of swimming. It applies to stroke survivors in the following ways, or the ways you can see on the screen there. Takes the stress off the joints. The water provides more resistance. May not need mobility aids that they use day to day while in the pool. It can improve their control, increase muscle strength, improve walking speed. And studies have shown, I believe, that it can also decrease spasticity, and that's the tightness that they feel, particularly common in the shoulder areas. And it can seem to give improvements in weight-bearing abilities, movement, and the flexor strength. So we know of the benefits. Some of the people that have been through the program I run have tried swimming, and I've asked them what they found to be the most challenging. They're on the slide there, barriers and some considerations for you. The first one is particularly relevant, travel, because very often a stroke survivor will not be able to drive after a stroke, so they're reliant either on others or on public transport or on taxis. So that is often an issue to even get them to a leisure centre or a swimming pool. Safety. A chap in Rochdale said he tried swimming and was a bit concerned about the walkway from the changing room to the pool, and he found it extremely difficult for someone who normally walk with a walking stick to get into the water, to the pool. So that was a big barrier. Changing facilities and appropriate swimwear. People perhaps feeling self-conscious once they've had a stroke. Cognitive issues, very common in stroke survivors. I was talking to a chap again in Rochdale this morning who was delivering a exercise class, and the chap he invited to come along ended up in Rochdale town centre because he got confused where he was supposed to be. So cognitive issues, very prevalent among people who've had a stroke. Similarly, the feeling of feeling intimidated in the water or scared. I know some local areas, Stockport for example, do run disability swim sessions for people of all disabilities, but obviously not specifically for stroke, but all disabilities, which can help. Communication issues, the aphasia issue again. Someone with aphasia going to a leisure centre and even getting from walking through the door to get to the pool can be quite a challenge if they've got communication issues, and will often be put off by that fact and not even attempt to. I mentioned the access into the pool situation. Is it safe? And the temperature, as I bet, might be too cold in the pool. So that's a little bit we do know about swimming. So, questions, I believe, are at the end now. That's our contact details from the Stroke Association. You've got them, obviously. You've got these slides. So there's our contact details.
And then, yeah, we just need to hand over to Andrew now. So let me just try and do that. Just 1 second. Andrew, you should have control now.
That's great. Okay. Just a pause there while I figure that out. Okay, so I'm just really to add on to the presentation from today. I'm going to talk about the Water Wellbeing Programme, which Swim England have been funded by Sport England to deliver. So we're funded up to 2021 at the minute, and yes, we have a team of health and wellbeing team in England who cover different areas, sort of northeast and northwest is my area in particular, but we also have other members of the team who cover sort of the other parts of England. And I guess the thrust in terms of the Water Wellbeing Programme came from going back to the cross-government strategy for sport and physical activity. The Swim England established what we call a health commission a few years back. And one of the first pieces of work that they did was to establish the impact of aquatic activity, and they commissioned a bit of work which resulted in what we now have, which is the Health and Wellbeing Benefits of Swimming report. And I definitely guarantee that, you know, recommended reading, not bedtime reading. It's pretty serious stuff. But really, essentially, what that was a number of systematic reviews around aquatic activity and health. We do use the word swimming synonymously sometimes, but when we talk about in terms of health, we are talking about aquatic activity, as well as swimming being part of that. And the findings from that report really highlighted the benefits of aquatic activity for people with long-term conditions, but at the same time maybe also identified that we don't necessarily know what works in terms of delivering those benefits and delivering those benefits to the whole population at scale. So what we set off on a journey of doing was to establish what would need to happen there. And we've conducted a lot of research over the years and developed insight tools as a result of a lot of that research. For instance, we've conducted some exercise referral research. There was the Swim London pilots, Let's Go Swimming, Dementia Friendly Swimming project as well, which have all transferred into our ongoing work around health. And that research and others have identified some of the key behavioural challenges that need to be overcome before an intervention can even begin to be effective. So we're trying to get people active, but we fail a lot of the time because there are some stumbling blocks along the way and things that get in the way. And we know that some of the key barriers to overcome when it comes to aquatics are often lower competence in water, lower awareness of the benefits, health literacy is an issue, lower confidence, basic health won't allow, lack of social support. The barriers are significant. And so we've also developed what we call our frontier model. Those who work in aquatics will have maybe seen this before, those who don't. Essentially, the frontier model is just a helpful way to understand how we approach swimming participation from a number of different angles. So we've got to increase swimming's visibility and relevance to people in the first place. So if we don't get that right, the marketing and the messaging behind our offers, then they won't really even consider that as an option in the first place. Frontier 2 suggests that we need to improve the overall environment. And we've done some work around that in terms of developing an environmental checklist and other tools that help us to make sure that the swimming environment itself is right and appropriate. And then, you know, if we get those things right, what we have to offer people in the pool and the activities we deliver and the opportunities to participate will hopefully be all the more successful, because we'll be able to recruit more people and identify more people and encourage them to be more active using aquatic spaces. So we apply this model to everything that we do, and the motivations to swim, to make sure that we get our offers right and ensure that we're attracting the right audiences. So we've developed in association with that, we've developed a model called the Water Wellbeing Programme, which is really to work across these boundaries. A lot of the barriers that people face don't just exist in the gym or in the pool. They cross boundaries, they cross settings, and they cross roles. So we developed this model to go with it. And the aim of the Water Wellbeing Programme is to create a sustainable health and wellbeing delivery model that health professionals feel confident to send their patients to. And it takes a whole pathway approach, and it focuses just as much on getting the marketing, the training, the environmental elements right, as just as much as the opportunities and activities to facilitate increased physical activity. So it really is a pathway approach, or sometimes we use the term whole facility approach, but actually some of the things that need to happen outside the facility even. And in terms of that, just ensuring that the environment's right, that the staffing, the programming opportunities are addressed to make the pool as inclusive as possible, as attractive as possible, and supportive of the inactive populations and those who are at risk of long-term conditions, who we focus on and we're targeting through this programme. And really the outcome of that is that we want more people with long-term conditions to participate in swimming and wider aquatic activity. So there are a number of focuses there, just the sort of coloured boxes in the middle of the screen. And one of those areas, for instance, is a simple solution, but actually something that's been a complex problem for a while, which is with pool entry systems, for instance. Pools are tricky enough places to navigate if you've got mobility restrictions or disability, and worse still, the existing hoist systems are generally seen as undignified and a barrier to participation as well. So we're starting to remove that barrier with support and funding around the implementation of pool pods excuse me, around England, and that's been backed up with guidance for new build facilities to ensure that new sites don't make the mistake of installing hoist systems that nobody will ever use because they're really off-putting. So that's one example of one of the things we're doing. Adult Learn to Swim exists, and there's a significant workforce nationally. I think it's around 10,000 new Learn to Swim teachers trained each year. And some of the resources that we've developed for the Water Wellbeing programme have been focused around swim teachers in terms of health condition information, so that swim teachers have a better health understanding, as well as being very, very good at teaching people to swim when they're faced with someone who has a health condition, that they understand a bit of the background there, and it makes that experience all the more positive for both involved. Exercise referral exists as well. I'll just move on to the pathway that exists around that and talk a little bit about around exercise referral. But we've also worked with a lot of partners with this programme as well, and obviously we're working with the Stroke Association and they're delivering this webinar today. But a raft of different organisations who we work with to develop different solutions, but also to also help to recruit people who would benefit from aquatic activity and swimming and get them involved, and lots of exciting things coming up, and hopefully we can help local areas to identify who the organisations might be that might have a local presence, that might have an influence on people with long-term conditions, to encourage them to be more active. So in terms of pathways, slide's gone a bit skew with it's not meant to be purple and black on background, but I think that's just been a conversion issue. But exercise referral exists across England, and we know, but use of aquatic spaces in terms of exercise referral is sometimes quite limited. And part of the reason for that is that, in terms of the research that we've conducted, is that the exercise referral workforce feel poorly equipped to be able to take people into water. They're generally gym-based and have level 3 exercise referral qualifications, and they understand the pathology and physiology and pharmacology of disease and how to adapt exercise around that, but don't necessarily know what to do in the water. So one of the things we've done to help firm up that pathway is develop a level 3 aquatic activity for health qualification to provide exercise referral instructors with the skills and the confidence to work with people delivering aquatic exercise programming in the pool. Another product that we're working in partnership with is a company called Good Boost. Working in partnership with them, this is an artificial intelligence application, which sounds quite high tech, but essentially it involves using tablet PCs waterproofed in the water to be able to provide exercise programs for people with long-term conditions. And it's been designed to really help overcome some of the key barriers to exercise for people who might have barriers because of pain, limited function, fear, multimorbidity. And the Good Boost system allows people to continue their rehabilitation. It helps them to focus on, for those who, for a whole host of reasons, wouldn't be able to weight bear, for instance, or where exercise on land might be uncomfortable for other reasons. It's a really innovative system, and it can help patients progress very quickly towards self-care, and it doesn't require intervention from an exercise referral specialist to deliver it either. So a really important innovation. It means exercise can be individualized and tailored around the individual. And it's also, because it's tablet based, it's an effective data collection tool, which means we can gather data at every session, feedback on pain, ease of movement, etc. And the artificial intelligence built into the system remodels the person's program and shapes that person's program around their condition and around the progress that they've been able to make. So it's a significant innovation, and it supports Programs like Escape Pain that don't have an aquatic component potentially, or other programs where there isn't an aquatic component. We can help in local areas to help develop those components around that. But it won't work in isolation. If we don't address, as I've said before, in terms of those frontiers, if we don't address the messaging, the marketing, ensure that we have the right workforce and the right supportive environments, then the best interventions in the world wouldn't succeed. So it's essential that you know, in terms of what I feel is needed to be able to address all of those elements, and hopefully that the water wellbeing model in its entirety has been able to think about some of these barriers, think about some of the obstacles that we need to overcome, and we have the tools and resources and the team in place to be able to help local areas to do that. In addition, well, it's not question time quite just yet, but in addition to that, we've developed an evaluative framework which looks at a number of outcomes around health, well-being, satisfaction, overall experience, cost effectiveness, and the benefits to the wider society that might come as a result of aquatic activity. And our insight team are employed and being used in terms of providing capacity to support what is effectively a national audit of aquatic activity. So what we want is operators to, across the country, to feed into the water wellbeing programme, become a part of it, and be part of that large-scale data collection exercise as well, to be able to demonstrate the effectiveness of aquatic activity, what works, what doesn't work. And hopefully, again, as I've said, we've got a team in place to be able to support you. So if anybody's interested, we have an email on the last slide there, just health@swimming.org, if anyone would be interested in being part of the water wellbeing programme.